All right, everybody, let's dive into something really interesting today. Prepping you for a criminal investigator job interview. We're talking about like crime scene analysis, how to handle evidence, the whole 9 yards.
Absolutely. And we've got your career guide right here, plus a bunch of typical interview questions. So we'll break down exactly what employers want to see, how you can totally nail those answers, and D, how RoleCatcher's AI can, seriously give you an edge.
It's like having a secret weapon.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, let's set the scene a little bit. Imagine those sirens wailing. You roll up to a crime scene. What's going through a criminal investigator's mind right at that moment? What are their top priorities?
Okay, so first things first, it's all about securing that scene, right? Making sure everyone's safe and sound, and then preserving anything that could be evidence. You don't want to mess with that.
Right, because even the tiniest mistake could, like, throw off the whole investigation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's really meticulous work from there on out. Observation, documentation, evidence collection. Think about fingerprints, DNA, what witnesses are saying. Every single detail matters.
Whoa, talk about pressure. And the career guide doesn't try to sugarcoat it either. Long hours, high-stress situations, and yeah, you might even face some danger on the job.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart. This job takes a special kind of person, someone who's got that analytical mind, who's resilient, and has a really strong moral compass. But the thing is, people who are right for this job, they find it incredibly rewarding.
Especially when they crack a case and justice is served.
Exactly. There's just no feeling like it. And speaking of cracking the case, let's crack the code on some of these interview questions, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first up, we've got a classic. Can you tell us about your experience conducting criminal investigations?
Seems pretty straightforward, but what are they really trying to figure out with that question?
So it goes way beyond just listing off what's on your resume. They want to hear about your actual process, how you solve problems, how you handle pressure. It's your time to really bring those experiences to life and show them, hey, I've actually walked the walk.
Okay, so how do you actually approach a question like that without, like, reciting your whole career history?
Think quality over quantity, right? Pick out two or three cases that were really impactful, maybe ones that relate to the specific role you're going for, and don't just tell them what you did. Emphasize the challenges you faced, what actions you took, and what the results were.
Got it. So instead of saying, I interviewed witnesses, you could say,
Exactly. You could say something like, in this one case that involved possible arson, I noticed some things didn't quite add up in what the witnesses were saying about, when things happen. But by really looking at their statements and comparing them to the physical evidence, I actually found a key detail that led us straight to the person who did it.
ooh, now that is way more compelling.
Huh.
It shows them you pay attention to the details, you can analyze information, and you're able to connect the dots.
Exactly. Now, for those of you just starting out, maybe you don't have a ton of on-the-job experience yet. Don't worry.
Right, because the career guide even mentions internships or volunteer work as really valuable stepping stones.
100%. Highlight anything where you got to use investigative techniques, even if it was on a smaller scale. Maybe you did a mock crime scene analysis during an internship or a research project for your criminal justice class. The point is to show them you understand the process of an investigation.
So even if you haven't,
Mm.
like, solved a major case yet, you can still show them that you think like an investigator.
Exactly. Okay, so let's say you nailed that first question right. They might come back with something like, how would you approach a brand new case?
And that's where they want to see if you've got a method to the madness. Right?
Exactly. They want to know that you're organized, you've got a system, you don't just jump in blindly.
All right, so walk me through it. What's a good way to handle that question?
Start by giving them a picture of your process. You could say, first, I'd go through all the available information, witness statements, police reports, any forensic evidence.
So you're establishing that framework for how you build a case, right?
Exactly. And then you can get into specifics, how you prioritize tasks, how you gather evidence, how you develop your plan of action, that kind of stuff.
And you'd obviously change up your approach a little depending on the case, right? Like a homicide investigation is going to be different from a white-collar crime.
Precisely. Being able to adapt and tailor your approach to different situations is key, and it's good to show them you can do that.
You know, that's actually where I think RoleCatcher's AI feedback can be a game changer.
Yeah.
You can literally practice these questions, and the AI looks at how you answer, then gives you suggestions on how to make it even better.
It really is like having a personal interview coach right in your pocket, you know? It helps you polish those answers, make your language stronger, and really tailor it to what that specific job is looking for, which Actually reminds me, this might be a good time to talk about ethics in this field.
Yeah, because keeping things ethical is huge EE in law enforcement, especially when you're dealing with sensitive information, people's lives, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And, they might hit you with a curveball like, can you describe a time when you faced an ethical dilemma during an investigation? How did you handle it?
Ooh, yeah, that one feels like you're walking a tightrope, right? You want to show them you're ethical, but you can also handle tricky situations.
Exactly. And it's not about pretending to be perfect or anything. It's more about showing them your integrity, like you're committed to doing the right thing, even when it's tough.
So what's the best approach for that kind of question? Should you use a real example, or could you make up a scenario?
Honestly, either way can work. The important part is to really highlight how you think things through, how you make decisions. If you're using a real example, keep it short and to the point, focusing on the ethical stuff, what you did, and how it all turned out.
So instead of telling them about every single detail of a case, you could say,
Something like, I was working on this fraud investigation once, and it turned out a close friend of mine might have been involved. Not directly, but still. It was tough, but I knew I had to tell my superiors so there wouldn't be a conflict of interest, keep everything by the book.
right. So it shows you're ethical and transparent.
Exactly. Now, if you go with a made-up scenario, make sure it's something a criminal investigator might actually deal with. For example, you could say, let's say I find evidence that totally contradicts what a witness is saying. But the thing is, this witness is in a vulnerable position and is scared of what might happen if they tell the truth. So I'd have to think about the potential harm of pushing them too hard versus how important it is to get accurate information. I'd probably talk to my superiors, maybe reach out to some victim advocacy groups, just to figure out a way to get what we need while keeping that witness safe.
Which shows them you've got empathy, you can solve problems, and D, you know how to handle tricky situations ethically.
Exactly. Okay, now let's switch gears a bit. Interviewers also like to see that you can think outside the box. Be ready for something like, tell me about a time you had to use creative thinking to solve a case.
It's all about those aha moments, right?
Yeah. But it doesn't have to be some crazy Hollywood plot twist. Just something that shows you're resourceful, you can connect the dots when others can't.
So instead of saying, I once cracked a coded message hidden in a painting.
Right. You could say something like, we were working on this case, trying to track down a suspect who'd gone completely off the grid. But then I remembered this guy had this thing for rare plants, right? So I worked with some local nursery and we actually managed to track his movements and arrest him.
That's awesome. Using those unconventional methods, those observation skills, love it.
And for anyone who's just starting out, maybe you haven't had that eureka moment in the field yet, think back to your training.
Oh, good point. The career guide talks about those certifications like CCSI, Certified Crime Scene Investigator, or the Certified Forensic Investigator, CFI. Could you use those experiences as examples?
Absolutely. You could say, back when I was doing my CCSI training, they had us do this super complex crime scene simulation. We had to use observation, bloodstain pattern analysis, evidence documentation, the whole 9 yards. But in the end, our team was able to figure out exactly what happened and who did it.
So even if you haven't done it in the real world yet, you're showing them you have the skills and knowledge.
Precisely. All right, now let's talk about building a case, because that's a big one. Interviewers often ask, how do you go about building a solid case against a suspect?
Time to channel your inner lawyer.
Not really. It's definitely good to know the law, but what they really want to see here is your investigative process. So focus on how you gather information, analyze it, and connect everything to tell the whole story.
Okay, so what are some of the most important steps to highlight there?
Start with the basics. Collecting evidence carefully, documenting everything, making sure that chain of custody is crystal clear. Then talk about interviewing witnesses and suspects. How do you get those statements? How do you spot inconsistencies? How do you ask the right questions to uncover the truth? It's like piecing together a puzzle, right?
Totally. Every little detail could be important.
Exactly. And don't forget about corroborating the evidence. You got to back up those witness statements with physical evidence whenever you can.
Because a strong case needs multiple layers of proof.
You got it. And this is one of those areas where a tool like RoleCatcher can be super helpful. It's not enough to just know the answers. It's about how you say it. RoleCatcher helps you tailor your language to what that specific employer is looking for.
Okay, so tell me more about how it does that. So how does RoleCatcher help you tailor your answers, like for a specific employer or job?
Okay, so RoleCatcher's AI, what it does is it looks at tons of data points, right? Like the exact words they use in the job description, even the company's values and their whole vibe. Then it gives you feedback on how to make your answers really click with them.
Wow, that's seriously smart. It's like having a cheat sheet for job interview.
Exactly. No more guessing games. You're not just memorizing generic stuff. You're giving them answers that are laser focused on what they want. Now, let's get back to those tough cases for a sec. Interviewers, they want to know you can handle things even when there's not a lot to go on. Be ready for a question like, how do you approach a case when you've only got limited or circumstantial evidence?
Okay, that one feels like they're testing how resourceful you are, right?
It is. But here's the thing. Instead of letting the lack of evidence freak you out, you actually use it to show off your strengths.
Ooh, I like that. Turning a potential weakness into a win. So how do you recommend handling that question?
First, just acknowledge it head on. You could say something like, I know cases with limited evidence need an extra careful touch. You really got to pay attention to detail. Then, shift the focus to what you bring to the table. I'm really good at analyzing trace evidence, forensic data, even witness statements to find those hidden connections and build a solid case.
So you're showing them you're the one who can find clues where others might not, right?
Exactly. And if you've got a specific example, even from a training exercise that shows off those skills, definitely mention it.
Right, because even those practice scenarios prove you can think critically under pressure.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to teamwork. Criminal investigation, it's definitely not a solo gig. They'll probably ask you something like, tell me about a time you had to work with other law enforcement agencies to crack a case.
So that's about communication, being able to work with different personalities, different ways of doing things,
Mhm.
all while trying to achieve the same goal.
You got it. Think about a case where you were a key player, but you also needed help from other agencies. Don't be shy about what you did, but also emphasize how important that collaboration was.
Okay, so for instance, give me an example. What could you say?
We were working this human trafficking case, right? My job was to follow the money trail, which meant diving deep into all these shell corporations. It meant working directly with the FBI's financial crimes unit. We had to share info, make sure our strategies were aligned, and by using each other's strengths, we were able to take down that whole network.
That really shows you can play nice with others in the sandbox, even across different agencies and jurisdictions.
100%. Okay, now for the curveball question you know is coming. How do you stay up to date on the latest trends in criminal investigation?
Oh yeah, they want to know you're not stuck in the Stone Age using outdated techniques.
Exactly. You got to show them you're hungry to learn, you're proactive, always striving to be on top of your game.
So how do you answer that without just like listing off every conference and course you've ever taken?
Talk about stuff that shows you're genuinely passionate about learning and growing instead of, I go to lots of webinars. Try something like, I'm really interested in cybercrime these days, so I just finished up a training program on digital forensics.
Oh, much better. That shows you're taking action, not just passively listening to stuff.
Right. And if you're part of any professional organizations, online forums, whatever, mention those. Even books or articles that have changed how you approach your work.
Because ultimately, it's about showing them you're plugged into the community, you're sharing what you know, always leveling up. Speaking of leveling up, let's talk about RoleCatcher again and that awesome AI video analysis tool.
Oh man, this tool is huge GE for interview prep. Seriously. You record yourself answering these questions, and the AI analyzes your body language, your tone, even your facial expressions.
Whoa, are you serious? It's like having a personal coach for everything.
Pretty much. It helps you catch any nervous habits you might have, polish your delivery, make sure your message is coming across crystal clear.
I wish I had that back when I was doing interviews. Well, looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive. So to our listeners out there, you are now armed with insights into the world of criminal investigation, strategies for those interview questions, and D, you've got the power of RoleCatcher's AI on your side.
Be prepared, be confident, go knock their socks off.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the beginning. Criminal justice is a huge field, always changing, always something new to learn. What was your biggest takeaway from our deep dive today?
Was there a question that really resonated with you? A particular skill you'd like to develop further? Hold on to that curiosity. It's going to take you far in this line of work.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we're out. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We know you've got what it takes to excel in this field. Go ace that interview.
We're rooting for you.
And whether you're prepping for your next interview or exploring a different career path entirely, RoleCatcher's got your back. Until next time, keep those investigative minds sharp.